Hi, and welcome to the world's stickiest learning. I'm here with George Araman. George, how are you?
Hi, Darren. I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm excited about our next podcast. So I'm going to read out the title because it's a bit of a mouthful, but I think it works. I can't get my prospects to reply. Use HBDI to get your prospects to reply. So that's the title of our fourth podcast on HBDI. George, it's going to be exciting for the next 20 minutes. What do
I'm
you
sure
think
it will
about that
be.
title?
Well, show me the money, like they say. So
Show
I'm
me the
pretty
money.
sure people are gonna, like our audience are really gonna love it.
Fantastic. So let's do a few minutes bringing people up to speed on HBDI. So we don't want to make an
Yes.
assumption they know. Now, you've kindly lent us your profile for HBDI.
Mm-hmm.
So HBDI is the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. It's a way of understanding how people think. And this is your profile. It's split into 4 quadrants, as everyone's is. Now, George, what does the left brain normally mean?
So the left brain is more of the rational brain. It's more of the logical brain. Whereas the right side of the brain is more the emotional side of the brain, or more the idea, the conceptualizing side of the brain.
Fantastic. So HBDI, or Herman tool, asks us to understand our thinking preference. Now, Ned Herman, back in the 70s, he split it also into the top half of the brain and the bottom half of the brain, giving us these 4 quadrants. Now, Herman coloured them as well. Obviously, they're not coloured in our head, but they are coloured here. So the further your profile goes towards this outer circle, the more you prefer to think in that way, but you can do all 4 of these. All right.
Yes.
Now let's see from our other podcasts. George, what does the blue quadrant mean?
So the blue is the analytical side of things. This is the part where I don't really enjoy doing. For
Yes.
me, facts tend to be more boring, very flat, very not imaginative. I'm more into the imagination side of things, the creativity. I think Leonardo da Vinci would agree with me somehow.
I think he
I,
would.
I,
I think
yeah.
you would, and you're in good company. All right, so
Yeah.
this is the facts quadrant. We'll use an F just to make it easy. This is the future quadrant, and you talked about creativity.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs love this quadrant, and this is where you are. You're quite creative, lots of
Mhm.
ideas. Then as we come down here, the red quadrant. Let me quiz you. What's the red quadrant?
So the red quadrant is more about the relational side of the quadrant. It's more like we like how we relate with others. It's more about the passion we bring into. It's about, like you mentioned in one of our podcasts, that, for example, the red is very important because they tend to bring the team together.
Yep.
And it's so even if sometimes people might think they're not really actually adding value, they are in the back scenes, and they're really holding the team together in a very efficient and effective way, and even energizing others to have better and more efficient results.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's the red quadrant that largely gets dismissed by people because it's emotional. And particularly as a
Yeah.
British man, I'm not supposed to show any emotion. I get that. The thing is, it's the red that drives us. You know, it chooses our career. We're passionate about retailing or engineering or whatever it is. It all comes from this red quadrant. Let's move on to our last quadrant, coming back to the left brain now, green. This is our project management. So this is feelings, this is form. What do you
Yeah.
remember around the green one?
So green is about planning, it's about structures, it's about systems, it's about like building systems, following structures, following rules, following guides, being very efficient on time. It's about time management. It's about all those like stricter to the rules and very particular and very. It's a box basically, putting someone in a
Perfect.
box.
Perfect. All right. So our 4 quadrants go blue, which is our facts-based quadrant, over to yellow, which is our future-based quadrant. Red is our feelings quadrant, and form structure is our green quadrant. Now, just to reiterate, we can do all 4, but the metaphor I use, because I'm a yellow, I'm a creative, I talk in metaphors, I get that, and it has its strength and its weakness, as do all quadrants. The metaphor I use is that I can do yellow in 5th gear. It's quite easy for me. Ideas come to me quite a lot. Whereas green, I do it in more like first gear. I can do it, but it's hard. And that's how we all should look at our profile. There are things that are easier for us to do and things that are harder for us to do.
Exactly.
Okay. So when you originally saw your profile, which was a few weeks ago now, because we've done a few of these podcasts, what did you think in terms of that mirroring you?
Oh, it was spot on. Like, because basically when I did the test and I was asked the question, where do you see like your own quadrants? I was more or less at 0.001 degree exactly where I got the results, because I already knew. I know that like my yellow and red are very prominent. The green is more when I'm at work and overdrive, and the blue is like I'd rather delegate it to someone else or.
Fabulous. No, I get that. I get that. And also, just for interest, you've seen on your profile that there's a solid black line showing where you prefer to think, and also a dotted line. The dotted line is how we work, how we are under pressure. And normally pressure equals work in the modern day, because there aren't many jobs now where you can sort of just not do a great deal, unfortunately, like there were in the 80s. So you have two profiles, and they don't always change, but they can do. So you have the profile of how I think normally and the profile of how I think when I'm under pressure. And some people's change and distort, others
like me.
Like yours. So, well, let's just on yours, they won't be able to see it on the camera, but what basically happens when you're under pressure is you actually go more green. You look for more structure, and you do less red. So you are less emotional. How does that manifest itself in real life?
So usually when I'm at work, I love planning systems, and I spend like lots and lots of time building the perfect system. Maybe it's the fear of whatever.
Yeah.
So I build the systems, and then I move to either the ideas or the facts, and then like the people or the red side, I leave it till really the very, very end. So this is how I would do it.
All right. And what we've talked about in other podcasts is how Herman and understanding your profile can help you in negotiation or in conflict. The way I like to understand what I think is the biggest advantage of Herman is it enables us to talk with each other about each other in the third person. So, for instance, I might say, oh, I see why you need that meeting where you see the whites of my eyes because you're red. Or a green might say, okay, I see why you need a plan. I might say to a green, I see why you need a plan because you're a green. You want to see all this in next steps. And it can help us avoid some of that conflict. But let's come back to the title of what we're talking about today, prospects. So would you just bring to life, what do you think's going on in the real world? Why are people fed up with not being able to get hold of their prospects?
Well, my guess is as good as anyone, but I would say that they're probably not using their own quadrant to their advantage. So, for example, a red, I'm pretty sure that each quadrant has an advantage or a specific way that would make them convince a prospect in a better way. And it also goes to like in both ways. Knowing the prospect, in which quadrant the prospect is, helps a lot in order to help to like talk to them the way they want to be talked to and the way they want to be heard in order to give them what they want, if it makes sense.
Yes, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the way I describe it is each of these might be a language, French, German, Bulgarian, and so on. And if I'm talking Bulgarian to a French person, they're probably not going to hear. So the way we need to communicate, and if we don't know the profile of our prospects, is to try 4 different ways. So, for instance, let me try and put you on the spot a little bit. I work on a Mac that's here. If I was trying to sell that over, let's say, an email marketing campaign, and I was talking to a blue, or I thought I'll try and connect with the blues, what things might I share with them about this Mac that I'm trying to sell?
So since you're selling a Mac and you're talking about the blue quadrant, you're probably going to emphasize on facts.
Yes.
So it's going to be like probably the pricing, how much the Mac would cost, why it's better, like you compare it to a PC, for example, why the Mac is better than the PC, what are the configurations, like how many people bought the Mac versus how many people bought the PC, those kind of things. So it's basically numbers.
Yes.
You're putting all the good use
Perfect.
of numbers, the good numbers that are better than like other competition.
Perfect. So I might list the processor speed, I might list the gigahertz, all those
Yeah.
nerdy type things, those
Mhm.
facts, and there might be a payment plan that looks like this as well.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right, well, let's go round because it gets a little bit harder as we go round this quadrant, but I'm sure we can do it together.
Mhm.
So if we're talking to the yellows, what might we talk about if we're selling this Mac to them, do you think?
Well, you just reminded me of Steve Jobs and his like publicity or idea of the iPod when
Yeah.
he said, so it's basically that like basically setting 1,000 songs in an iPod or something like that. It's in a way similar to we could use a similar analogy to a laptop. So saying, for
Yeah.
example, like 1,000 movie in a laptop or whatever.
It could
Something
be.
like
It
that.
could be. I think we also need to put the Mac in the bigger picture. Maybe we're selling more of a lifestyle. So it might have an image of the person with their Mac under their arm going to the coffee shop because it's part of what they're doing. And then they're in the coffee shop and then they're on the train and this thing's opening quite quickly. And what we're trying to do is paint that future vision lifestyle for them. And so
Especially
maybe, go on.
go on. I was just gonna say digital nomads like would
Yes.
really actually love that, and they're like always traveling and going to places, and so this would be a really good thing.
It would, it would. And maybe a 30-second video might just bring that whole lifestyle together and they can visualize them using it in this place and that place and how quick it is and some of those other things. Okay, so we've nailed the blues and the yellows. All right, let's talk about the greens. So these guys are into next steps. They're project managers. How do we sell this Mac to them, do you think?
So here we're probably going to emphasize on structure and I think here we would bring in the processes and how the Mac is more efficient than, for example, the PC or any other
Yeah.
competition. We would bring in, for example, the different tools we can use in Mac that we're not able to use in PC. And the floor
Yeah.
is yours.
Yeah, okay, no, that's all right. It gets a little bit harder with these colors, doesn't it? So one of the things that these guys might appreciate is the timeline from ordering to arrival. Maybe a finance plan as well might help to them to
Yeah.
understand it, and that they'll pay the Mac off by 2025 with this payment plan would be something that might be useful for them.
Yeah.
These guys also want to understand the next steps. So let's say that we lay that out in terms of how the Mac might work for them. You can set it up like this, and this will look like this, and improve your productivity like this. So we might show them the options of the add-ons that the Mac has to improve productivity and how that links in a chain, because that's how these guys think, almost in a chain coming together.
So in this for this particular quadrant, then probably either like a conference or sending maybe a video of the product and how you to use the product, in this case the Mac, would be actually a really good idea. This is what you're saying, right?
Yes, yes. Let's strive for our reds. Now, these are our kinesthetic or our feely, touchy type people. So over email marketing, that's going to be really hard. So how do we sell this Mac to them over email?
Nostalgia. We use nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, the Barbie phenomenon. I think they nailed it really good. I didn't watch the movie, by the way. It's just like from all the marketing buzz that I heard around that, it was really good because they used nostalgia and they brought back in a way the days of Barbie and made it like a whole movement. So it's basically this that we're trying to do with the red quadrant.
It is. It is. I would also share testimonials. Now, this could almost trip into the facts, the blue quadrant, but what we'll try and do is share testimonials about how people feel. Wow, it was the best thing I'd ever had. When I opened it, the design was amazing. I could type so much quicker. The feel of it was wonderful. And what we're trying to do is bring that to life for these people through other people that have said some things.
Especially influencers as well.
Especially influencers. Very good point. Very good point. So we've touched on how we might communicate in the language of our prospects, and we have to try each one of these. So if we take an example, this might be quite challenging for both of us, but if we were selling McDonald's, we would try and sell. Now, Ray Kroc, who founded McDonald's, was all about consistency of the burger. What we've got to do is take that USP and then expand it into the 4 languages. Now, that might be tricky for us to do now, but what I'm looking for is anyone who has a USP, they've got to put it in all 4 languages and try and talk to their prospects in all 4 languages, one at a time, and see if they're floating their boat in different ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, for example, in this case, since McDonald's is basically a green quadrant, like when it was born,
yes,
since it's about systems,
yes.
how would we replicate it? How would we replicate it for each of the 4 quadrants? Like communicated in.
Yeah, so let's say we're Ray Kroc and we're trying to get investment from McDonald's, which is one of the things he did. He might say to the blue quadrant, the consistency will increase sales by 5% because that's what customers are looking for. He might say to the investors for the yellow quadrant that by having consistency, we can have more franchisees right across America because consistency is what we're looking for. For the greens, he might describe the actual process of how we achieve that consistency in store. And there's a wonderful piece in the Founder film on Netflix of a tennis court and how they lay out the different parts of the store, the restaurant, which is brilliant. And what we're trying to do is take that USP and put it in the 4 quadrants. So for us, the world's stickiest learning, the facts might be the blue. Okay, how sticky is it? How much behavioral change do you achieve more than anyone else? In the yellow, we're looking for, okay, over the next 6 months, we've got a learning culture happening more than anyone else because people are changing their behaviors and looking for more. Fabulous. And you can see how we might take each USP and communicate that quadrant differently.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
So let's come back to the title of our podcast, and we need to wrap up in a moment. I can't get my prospects to reply. Use HBDI to get your prospects to reply, because everyone's frustrated with either being ghosted, that they have had some communication, or getting nothing back. So if it were an email marketing campaign, I would encourage people to think of 1 quadrant at a time and what you're going to communicate. Now, we're limited on email marketing. We're limited to maybe a video or a text or a piece of or an image. It's not long, but it's critical we know who we're targeting. Now, the easier quadrants are probably the blue. Facts is easy. It gets a little bit harder when we get down to the red, but with some research is very possible. All right.
Love it.
So, George, what else do you think our viewers would need in order to get their prospects to reply?
So, just like you just mentioned, it would be interesting to do a preliminary research before, like working on the project or the product or the email. In this case, by really actually going, for example, like you gave, I think, an example in one of the podcasts, to go on LinkedIn and really research the person you're going to target, to understand what, like, the general energy, how they are talking. Are they talking more about numbers? Are they talking more about systems? Are they talking more about feelings or people they know? Are they talking more about ideas? You can see that, for example, by looking at the posts they are commenting on or writing. You can look at like their profile, their bio, the way they put their picture and everything. This is super important because it will help us do a lot of like preliminary work for that.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I was talking about email marketing to the masses. You're talking about individual, and both are absolutely what we need to do. So let me give you a top tip on that. That if you're targeting one particular person, as a rough rule of thumb, we can overlay the VKA model, which is visual, kinesthetic, auditory, which is roughly our learning inputs or our communication inputs and outputs, with HBDI. And let me tell you how we might do that. So anyone that's here or here is typically a visual learner. And when you're looking for their text or their profile, they might use words like see, or they might use something like, I envisage this. All right. So
I
they're the
imagined
sort
it.
of, I imagine they're the sort of things that would turn these guys particularly, and to an extent, some of these guys. All right. When we come down to our greens, we're looking for things like next steps or timeline or timescale will be the sort of words that would indicate we're looking for a green. All right. And then if we come over to our reds, our feeling people, our kinesthetic people, we're looking for those words like feel. We're looking for a lot of words around people. So on VKA, these are typically visual people. All right. So we might use images to turn them on. These guys are typically auditory. We talked about words like hear. So these guys are good. They look at their ears a lot.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
That's it. And then we've got the feelings people here, which is our kinesthetics. Now, I'm trying to take two models and overlay them. It doesn't always work, but it can give us good targeted guesswork.
I think it's brilliant. I think it really gives, at least for me, like it gave me an idea of how to better like know from the keywords or from the words they are using, how to reach out to the prospect, and it's really good. And I'm pretty sure like the audience, I don't want to assume, but I think it's going to be interesting.
So my last piece is to issue a challenge to our readers to look at an email and see if they can pick up some of these words and guess from an email. This is obviously assuming they've had some limited communication, but they haven't yet sold what they need to, and see if they can understand which quadrant their prospect's in. Because if they can, then they can start talking more French to them or German or whatever the language is that they really need to. And if they do, they'll find that they get into a slipstream, which is much, much easier for them. All right.
Love it.
George, any questions before we close?
So I do have a question. So the question is a bit, so what I'm trying to say is, let's say we're talking with a prospect and who's in one of the four particular quadrants. Let's say, for example, the blue. How would you approach this prospect in each of the different phases? So basically, we're going to be using all four quadrants, but like probably you're going to initially start with an emphasis on the blue quadrant first, but then would you go more towards the green, then the yellow, then the red, or how would you do that? Like if we take an example of an email, for example, the first series of email would be, for example, facts. Then you would need a second email. What would the second email be more about? Is it still going to be facts, or would you go more towards systems because blue are close to green in a sense, or do you see what I'm trying to get at?
I think so. If I understand your question, so if I'm doing email marketing, mass marketing, I don't know who my audience is, and I'm sure they're a combination of all four. I'm going to once a week do a blue, then the next week I'm going to do a yellow in no particular order. I just need to make sure in a month I've hit these people in all four languages to make sure I've covered what Herman called whole brain thinking. And then hopefully I get a prospect replying. And if they reply on the blue, I probably know that they're a blue. Let's keep talking blue. And if they reply on green, and so on. And what I'm trying to do is talk their language all the way through. Where I've got to start is stage one with an email or emails covering the whole brain to see what floats their boat.
Love it.
Okay. George, thank you. You have been at our podcast of I can't get my prospects to reply. Use HBDI to get your prospects to reply. I think we've shared a number of good tips for people to start using. If you'd like to get your HBDI profile, then please, the link will be on the website or on this podcast. It doesn't cost that much, and it also really can help with teamwork, conflict, and negotiation. George, thank you again for your help.
Thank you, Darren. It was great being there with you.
Thank you.